Assalamu alaikum. I welcome you all to this second of the series of the seminar of Serendip, which is nationwide dissemination of GDM guidelines by SOGP and CEFIS and PES, the Pakistan Endocrine Society. So let's have Talawat-e-Quran first.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.
Now I would request Professor Razia Qurecho, President SOGP, to give us her introductory remarks for the training program. We would request Professor Khurshid Khan, who is President Pakistan Endocrine Society, and whom we welcome wholeheartedly because the collaboration between SOGP and PES has been a great turning point in this dissemination. So Professor Khurshid Khan, I would like you to give your introductory remarks. Thank you.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Thank you very much, Shaila, for your kind introduction. I'm very grateful for the collaboration, what we are seeing here from between all these organizations, I should say, SAFES, Pakistan Endocrine Society, and Society of Obstetrics and Gynecology, Pakistan, SOGP. I think this is in itself a landmark accomplishment. I remember the very first guidelines, which were like 3 years ago, I believe, Madam, I believe, Rubina Sohail from Lahore, maybe she was very instrumental at that point in the initial set of guidelines which were done, and Dr. Abbas Raza, he's always a very shining star from our organization, Pakistan Endocrine Society. And anytime we need collaboration with the other organization, we need collaboration with the different countries, international collaboration. Abbas Raza, Dr. Abbas Raza is our go-to guy person. This is the person we always go to ask for. And he has done a wonderful job in connecting all these organizations, connecting all these platforms. And Alhamdulillah, it is a great day here in Pakistan that now, instead of talking on individual forums, instead of talking in small pockets, we are talking on bigger platforms, rather talking with the collaboration of multiple organizations. And this is like a single, the message what we are giving right now is going to be for everyone from all corners. So this is a very, I would say in a way, unified guidelines what we are doing for hyperglycemia and pregnancy. Because I feel endocrinologists and our OBGYN colleagues, they are the equal stakeholders when it comes to managing hyperglycemia in pregnancy. And if we, that was the need of the hour, we come up with really a consensus statement so that any patient who's seen by an OBGYN or seen by an endocrinologist, we all say the same thing to the patient. We all have same set of criteria to diagnose them, same set of goals to manage these patients. And the purpose of these guidelines is not only that we as specialist endocrinologists or our colleagues as specialist OBGYN, they follow that. But purpose is a patient who's seeing some general practitioner in the far-flung area in Rajanpur, in some part of Balochistan. And if we disseminate these guidelines at a widespread level, across the country, then those physicians, those general practitioners would be talking the same language. They will be talking about the same diagnostic criteria to the patient. They would be managing patients on the same goals what have been said. So that is the beauty of establishing these kind of guidelines with the collaboration of all the stakeholders. And there's a universal acceptance also. For example, if any single guideline comes from PEST platform or SOGP platform, maybe people, and the message is not unified, then people may have different voices coming from different corners in terms of the management of these patients. But since we have these unified guidelines, and I'm very grateful to our Pakistan Endocrine Society colleagues, Dr. Aisha has been very instrumental in working on these guidelines. I would call this, she is really a workaholic. She is a workhorse when it comes to putting things, academic things, guidelines on PEST platform. And a lot of words of appreciation for our OBGYN colleague, also the president of SOGP, Professor Razia Qurejo, their academic council, Professor Shabeen, Dr. Shahla, and so many others. We don't have much time, so here I will stop my further talk. And I'm very grateful to all of you for the hard work. And I'm very grateful to God that we are, alhamdulillah, on one platform, multiple organizations working together and giving one unified message to all the healthcare providers and the patient, and all for the benefit of our patients and medical community. Thank you very much.
We really appreciate the efforts made by SOGP, PEST, and CEPHES. We acknowledge the efforts of CEPHES for going ahead, getting this idea of going ahead with the guidelines. They were first in line, then the SOGP stepped in, and we all made a concerted effort towards making a unified guideline. And I think we are not very different from each other. We all thought of the same thing. And this will go a long way in improving women's health in Pakistan, along with reducing the incidence of this very high non-communicable disease of diabetes. The type 2 diabetes, Pakistan has a very high incidence, almost about 25% of the population is living with diabetes. So with these efforts, these TOTs are aimed towards having a unified, nationwide, similar strategy to reduce this. And this would not only reduce the short-term morbidity, mortality of women, but also go ahead in the form of reducing type 2 diabetes incidence in Pakistan. So with this, I would like to play the recorded message by Professor Razia Qurejo.
Dear all SOGP members, healthcare providers, family physicians, and members of the Pakistan Endocrine Society, Assalamu Alaikum. It is a great pleasure and honor for me to welcome you all today in this first training course for the trainers on the diabetes in pregnancy. As all of you know, that the hyperglycemia in pregnancy is a major public health issue in our country. So timely intervention and diagnosis of this problem is it will reduce the adverse pregnancy outcome. So in order to diagnose the diabetes in pregnancy, SOGP has made the guidelines for this, and these guidelines have been published in International Journal of the Diabetology. And these usually the guidelines based preconception counseling, screening of the diabetes, diagnosis and the management during pregnancy, labor and the birth. It also includes the neonatal care and also about the advice for the contraception. So the aim of this developing these guidelines is to standardize the clinical practice of the diagnosis and management of the diabetes in pregnancy at the all healthcare centers across the country. So for this, our mission of the SOGP is also to collaborate with the other national societies in order to promote the knowledge of healthcare providers to carry out the research. For this purpose, we have also collaborated with the Pakistan Endocrine Society for arranging this course. Today, we are starting this training course for the trainers based on these guidelines. I hope this will be helpful for all the healthcare providers. So this is the first course of the training of the trainers. Inshallah, I hope we will collaborate with the Pakistan Endocrine Society. I am also thankful to Gates Pharma for organizing this seminar or this training workshops for these providers. So Gates Pharma is also very helpful in making these guidelines, and they are also very helpful in publishing these guidelines. So I am, on behalf of SOGP, I am very thankful to Gates Pharma for supporting SOGP, and I hope in other also activities they will support. So thank you so much.
Now I would like to also thank Gates Pharma for having this virtual presentation, who made it possible, and for helping us having this nationwide dissemination. I would also like to welcome my chairperson for GDM committee, Professor Shabir Naz, who is on board with us. Professor Abbas Raza, I would request you to give us your comments. He's the immediate past president of PES and CEPHIS, and he was also very much instrumental in having this collaboration. Professor Abbas Raza, we salute you. Please give us your valued comments.
Thank you, Sheila. I really appreciate the kind words that you and Khurshid have bestowed on me. And again, I feel very humbled with it. But I think an important part in developing any consensus is finding good people and finding good friends. And I think I'm not neither hardworking nor any other capabilities, but I've been just lucky. Starting from finding good friends across the countries to come up with the CEPHIS guidelines, and then finding people like you, Dr. Shabin and Dr. Razia Qurejo, who are willing to work to help actually at the end of the day, the patient care that we provide in our own setting. And I think it's a very humbling experience now that this is the time, and again, I don't know if I'm using the proverb right, but this is the time when the rubber meets the road. And again, when we're actually communicating to our physicians who are taking care of these people who have diabetes, hyperglycemia during during pregnancy. So I'm very excited. And again, this is a dream come true, at least for me, when we got together, implemented and wrote down, gotten the information. And again, I must appreciate people like Khurshid, who've been all along a team player. And I think that's a big quality of a leader. And again, looking at Dr. Shaila, Dr. Shabim, and other, and obviously my colleague and my friend Aisha, who have all been a team player. I think this is nothing but a team effort which has culminated into this event. So I'm very happy, and I would want to stay between you guys and a great CME activity which lies ahead. One quick thing, apart from CEPHIS guidelines, CEPHIS initiative, and treatment of hyperglycemia and pregnancy, there's also another exciting part, which is for the first time happening in this region, I would say. And again, Aisha and the rest of the team will explain what does it mean. And that is a smart dog concept, in which people who have joined in earlier, and I see the number as 105 people participants right now, they will not regret joining in early and staying in for the whole event, because at the end of the day, you will get to hear, we will select 3 smart doctors who have attended it, listened to the content and answered the question, and their names will be not only posted, but they will also be rewarded a small token of a clinical significance, practice significance gift, as well as recognition from SOGP and SAFES and PES. So with that, I'll hand you back, Dr. Shella, to take the proceedings further. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Baz. That was very kind of you to be with us today and announce this. I would like to talk about this, the guideline. How would we be disseminating it? So I would be your moderator. I work I'm the Dean Clinical Science at CMH Lahore, and I'm heading the department there. I'm also advisor in Armed Forces and member of the academic board. I co-chaired the guideline committee as well. We had these messages, and before I would proceed with the sessions, I would like to tell you that there would be a pre-poll before each session. And after the talks of the 3 sessions, we would be conducting a post-poll. I would request each participant to attempt the poll and take the quiz, answer and submit, press the submit button, whatever answer they have chosen. And we would be telling you the post-poll results. We will be having this again. And we will be announcing the 3 winners of the session. It would be a time-bound activity, and all would be depending upon how quickly you do the quiz. And you would be recognized as a smart dog of Serendip, as Professor Master Zapil told you, and you'll be given a Littmann Classic 3 stethoscope, which is a great thing to have. So before we proceed with our first session, I would like to have the first pre-poll questions on board, and you'll be given 2 minutes. Okay, so we are timing you now. Please attempt both the questions and submit. It is sufficient time for you to do it. We will not be participating in it, but this is for the participants of the webinar. Once you select your answers, you must submit.
Dr. Shella, if you could explain to them as well, we have to click on the right answer and submit, just to reinforce, so more people can supply.
Yes, I did so. You have to select the right answer, click on the right answer, and at the end of the second question, you need to submit. You have to press the button submit. That's how we'll be getting the access to them. We will give you another 15 seconds to submit. So this is the poll result. Now we will be closing the poll, and we will be going towards our first session. So for first session, I will be inviting our chair of the GDM committee from SOGP Academic Board, Dr. Shabeen Naz Masood, who's professor and HOD of Obstetrics and Gynecology at ISRA Medical College, Karachi. And she has got a great interest in diabetes. She's had numerous publications, both international and national. And we were together and it was a pleasure working with her as chair. And we got the guideline published in the International Journal of Diabetology on 25th December 2020. That was a great achievement, because it was international recognition, also endorsed by Diabetes Asia Study Group, and it was very much accepted. And now a second guideline, of which we were a part of it, both Professor Shabeen Naz and myself, MENA region, which is the Middle Eastern region. The guideline is underway of publication, and it's a very great collaboration. Professor Shabeen Naz has about 5 articles about diabetes published this year. And she has been a part of all our training programs regarding GDM and pre-gestational diabetes in pregnancy. Professor Shabeen Naz, I invite you for your presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Shella, for those kind words and very, what to say, elaborate introduction. Thank you very much. And I hope I'm visible, I'm audible to everybody.
Yes, you are.
Yes, madam.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Now I'll be sharing my slides. To start with, in the name of Allah, the most beneficial, the most merciful, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I'm very, very happy to be here in this second session of Serendip, which is a joint collaboration between PES, CEFIS, and SOGP. And for this, I am greatly thankful to Dr. Abbas, Dr. Khurshid, and obviously our friends from SOGP. But mostly I'm thankful to Dr. Aisha Sheikh because of her continuous efforts for more than 14 months. Now we are here with this session of Train the Trainer program, and this is the second session. So thank you, Dr. Aisha, and all the members. And today we are speaking about hyperglycemia in pregnancy, guidelines for screening and diagnosis. And I'm not very happy to talk about this guidelines for screening and diagnosis, because the more you talk, the more disappointment you get. This is a contradictory statement, and I'll try to prove why I'm saying that. So with this, as we all know that we are celebrating 100 years of insulin discovery, insulin centenary, and this is a reflection on the advancement of diabetes care in the past 100 years. And ambition for the next 100 years to strive to defeat diabetes, and more so to manage hyperglycemia in pregnancy. Insulin, as you know, was discovered in 1921, a life-saving discovery by Banting and Best. Talking about the insulin treatment to achieve a better obstetric and perinatal outcome has evolved significantly since 1920 to date. But when it comes to screening and diagnosis, what is the problem that we have not been able to agree for screening and diagnostic criteria? It has been more than I think 8 decades that screening and diagnosis is being talked about, but still there are no agreed screening and diagnostic criteria. And as a result, global burden of hyperglycemia in pregnancy is increasing. And we all know that this is because of absence of prevalence data, which is a key barrier in understanding the true scale of GDM at both regional and national levels. So what is the problem there? You can see the gray areas. Pakistan has been placed in blue area. I don't know why, but these gray areas are those which have no established data set for gestational diabetes or diabetes in pregnancy. Pakistan and India, though, have been colored blue. That means we do have data set, but actually speaking, India does have so much of the screening and so much of the research papers about it, but Pakistan has yet to come up. Why I was saying this, that there are no screening and diagnostic criteria. If you remember, this slide was presented last time also. This is Mrs. X, 35 years, 7th gravida. And she had 6 pregnancies presently at that time, and this photo was taken. It was taken on 22nd December 2021. And she was 16 weeks of pregnant at that time. This was her 7th confinement, and she has none alive. And now at this time, she has been diagnosed as a case of gestational diabetes mellitus. And I had played her this video last time also.
मेरी शादी को ना 15 साल हो गए, मेरे ना 6 बच्चे ना फौत हो गए, यही शुगर के मसले की वजह से। अभी ये 7वां बच्चा है मेरा, 4था चल रहा है मेरा। ये भी यही मसला हो रहा है, अभी भी शुगर का मसला हो रहा है। पहले भी शुगर की वजह से कोई 8वें महीने में बच्चा गया हुआ है, कोई 7वें में, कोई 6वें महीने में चला गया बच्चा।
So this lady, now let us hear what she has to say.
मेरा नाम जायदा है, मैं यहाँ 4थे महीने में आई थी। इलाज भी बहुत करवाया था, मगर यहाँ 4थे महीने में जब से आई हूँ यहाँ टेस्ट करवाया, टेस्ट में मेरा शुगर निकला है। पहले बच्चे भी मेरे शुगर की वजह से चले गए, मुझे पता ही नहीं चला। यहाँ जो टेस्ट करवाया शुगर निकला, यहाँ शुगर भी मेरी कंट्रोल आ गई है, शुक्र है अब अल्लाह ताला की मर्जी से बच्चा भी हुआ है और 6 बच्चे ना मेरे पेट में ही मर गए थे, वो बच्चे नहीं है मेरे। अब 9वें महीने में मेरा ब्लड प्रेशर हाई हो रहा था, वो उसी की वजह से मेरा सीजर भी हुआ है। शुक्र है अब ये 7वां बच्चा है, मेरी गोद में है, अल्लाह ने मुझे नवाजा है।
And this video was recorded yesterday, 31st May 2020, the same woman who was presented earlier. Lack of timely screening and diagnosis costed this woman years of despair, deprivation, social stigma, physical and mental anguish, and the joy of motherhood was no more with her. We healthcare professionals have any justification for this omission? This was my opening sentence that I said, that still we have to go a long way to save our women. And for one mistake made for not knowing, 10 mistakes are made for not looking at. Very nicely said by J.A. Lindsay, a physician way back in 1933 from England. So screening for diabetes in pregnancy, as I said, there are no screening and diagnostic standards. So the first question that comes up, and most of the literature, they say otherwise, we have made the guidelines for our country, for our region. So we have to look at our situations. So the question that most of the guidelines, they do not answer is that first trimester blood glucose screening with OGTT, or it should be a second trimester around 24, 28 weeks of gestation. So why do we ask for a first trimester OGTT? With this data coming from Pakistan, the second National Diabetes Prevalence Survey, it clearly says that 26% of the people are diabetic in our country, and almost half of them have pre-diabetes. With a population 76% overweight and 62% obese. And this was published by our very dear friend, Professor Abdul Basit and Professor Abdul Samad Shera, along with others. So early versus late screening protocol, why is that necessary? We belong to Asian ethnicity. Obesity, as we just observed, higher body mass index and insulin resistance are added risk factors for undiagnosed diabetes in early pregnancy. Where metabolic testing, are women, they do not go outside unless they are pregnant or unless they are severely ill. So metabolic testing outside the pregnancy is commonly not performed. And this increases the need for early screening during pregnancy to identifying the dysglycemia or pre-existing diabetes before the period of rapid fetal organogenesis, which is 0 to 8 weeks. Similarly, one of the Indian studies, which is a STRIDE study, and we have extrapolated many of our data from Indian studies till we had our guidelines, until we start our own research protocols. It says that prevalence of GDM is high even during the first trimester in Asian Indian population. This calls for earlier screening for GDM among high-risk ethnic groups like Asian Indians. We also are Asians. And this study is being done by our very good friend, Dr. Vishwanath Singh Mohan. The study that we did, this was a project, World Diabetes Foundation project of gestational diabetes mellitus. This was a second project awarded for GDM in Pakistan. It was a first project in the sense that it was a pan-Pakistan project. And this was awarded, I was the principal investigator for this. And you can see that when we screened more than 13,000 women in this project, and women who were less than 14 weeks of gestation, 34.4% of them, they were screened positive with this TIPSI criteria. Later on, when the data cleaning and other things were done, out of more than 13,000 pregnant women, you can see first 20 weeks of pregnancy, 24% were screened positive. Again, talking of this woman, she is 21 years, obese, her weight was 85 kilograms, and she came to us at 18 weeks of gestation with raised blood glucose of 250 milligrams per DL and was diagnosed only 10 days back. She was on metformin TDS with uncontrolled blood sugars and HbA1c of 7.2%. Ultrasound showed cardiac abnormalities with pericardial infusion, and this ultrasound was done by an MBBS doctor who wrote that she was a sonologist, and some street from some very small ultrasound setup. Family history: both parents were diabetic, siblings obese. She lives in Sakkar, and none of them were ever screened for. Siblings were never screened for blood glucose. So this was her recording that we did.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम इकरा, आपकी उम्र 21 साल है, आपकी शादी को 1.5 साल हुआ है और आप हमारे पास अभी माहवारी वो अपने हमल के 5वें महीने में आई है ना, और आपको अभी अल्ट्रासाउंड में कुछ मसला बताया गया है। क्या मसला बता रहे हैं आपके बच्चे? दिल बच्चे का सही नहीं बना हुआ है। और कोई तकलीफ आपकी मसला बताया गया है आपका? शुगर का, आपकी शक्कर बढ़ी हुई आ रही है ना, और कितने दिन पहले पता चला है? इससे पहले नहीं पता चला। आप डॉक्टर के पास गई थी इस प्रेगनेंसी में शुरू से? अच्छा, और शक्कर का टेस्ट नहीं हुआ था कभी? अच्छा, अभी जो है ये मुझे बताएं कि आपकी जो खानदान में किसी और को शक्कर है? आपकी अम्मी अब्बू को, भाइयों को? और भाइयों को? अब भाई आपके वजन में ज्यादा है या नॉर्मल है? ठीक है। अच्छा, उसका टेस्ट हुआ है?
So this is the state of affairs. You know, she came to us undiagnosed, early pregnancy, undiagnosed. She is probably a case of pre-existing type 2 diabetes, and she didn't ever know. And she was offered termination of pregnancy. When an ultrasound was done around 20 weeks of gestation, 22 weeks of gestation, from a very renowned sonologist, she said the heart of the child was perfectly normal. She came to us for the termination of pregnancy. So this is the sorry state of affairs in our part of the world. So we need to address this issue very carefully, very seriously, and all the doctors should understand that what to do if a woman comes to you and how to treat her. Now, blood glucose, talking about my topic, blood glucose screening, in our guidelines, we have just given 3 methods of screening, okay? There are a number of blood sugar screening methods, but we have pointed only for the 3 methods for blood glucose screening so as to reduce the confusion. So OGTT for blood glucose screening, at first antenatal booking visit, whenever the woman comes, obviously when she first comes, she will not be fasting. So first antenatal booking visit, all pregnant women, obviously those with pre-existing history of diabetes will not be screened. They are advised a 75 grams oral glucose test irrespective of risk factors. Remember, we are advocating universal screening, not risk-based screening, because we are Asians, we already are carrying one risk, and obesity, you just saw in the earlier slide, 62 to 70% of the people are obese or overweight. So we already are carrying so many risk factors. So risk factor is not the criteria. Universal screening should be done. And recommendations are that OGTT and blood glucose screening should be done after 8 hours of fasting and not 12 hours of fasting. Fasting blood glucose is taken, followed by 75 grams glucose load dissolved in 250 cc of water, and is given to drink slowly over a period of 3 to 5 minutes to avoid nausea and vomiting. Diagnostic values of blood glucose are different from the control values, and we are advocating IDSPG criteria, and the criteria, this is given everywhere. You can have a screenshot of this, that fasting should be 92 milligrams, 1 hour 180, and 2 hour more than or equal to 150. Any of the above values are considered as diagnostic of GDM. So this is called mild hyperglycemia. And severe hyperglycemia means that if fasting blood glucose ever is more than 126 or equal to, or 2 hours postprandial is more than 200 milligrams. I'm talking of OGTT. If these values ever come, then she may be diagnosed as having a type 2 diabetes, which may have been undiagnosed so far. And anytime her random blood glucose is more than 200 milligrams with symptoms of diabetes, she may be assigned the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. So women who have normal blood glucose values, what should be the frequency? On initial OGTT, a second OGTT is recommended around 24 to 28 weeks. And in third trimester also, most of the guidelines, they do not recommend to have a third trimester OGTT as well. But with our high-risk population, we recommend third trimester OGTT if she is screen negative in the earlier screening, and especially if she belongs to high-risk group. Fasting blood glucose is the second modality of screening. And as I said earlier, that if fasting blood glucose, that is after 8 hours of fast, is more than 126 milligrams, then she may be diagnosed as pre-existing diabetes mellitus. And if fasting blood glucose is between 92 and 125, then she may be considered as having gestational diabetes mellitus. So DIPSI method is a third method. The women, they find it very difficult to come in fasting state, especially when they are pregnant. They have to travel long distance, and to stay fasted till they reach the laboratory is very difficult for them. So in this method, no fasting is required. We have not given this criteria in our guideline, but this is this we have mentioned in the MENA region guideline, that is Middle East and North African guideline, and this is a recognized method of blood glucose screening. Again, the same thing, dissolve in 250 cc of water, drink it slowly, and take a single venous sample 2 hours after glucose ingestion. And the diagnostic cutoff here will be 140 milligrams per DL. It may be less sensitive, it may be less specific, but at least you are not going to miss the women. HbA1c can be performed during the first trimester of pregnancy to identify and prevent poor pregnancy outcomes, especially if there are higher values like 6.5, and they are diagnostic of pre-gestational diabetes. But however, HbA1c testing is not recommended for screening or diagnosis of GDM. This may please be taken very clearly, especially in pregnancy. Now, who are the high-risk groups? So the high-risk groups, as far as the history is concerned, if the family history of diabetes or history of GDM in previous pregnancy. These two risk factors, they go with history. Another two risk factors, they go with obesity. Either mother is obese, or she had a macrosomic fetus in the current, or a previous baby with macrosomia. And obviously the last part, that is ethnicity. We are Asians, we all belong to high-risk group. Additional high-risk groups have also been identified in many of the guidelines. They may be considered. So in conclusion, the recommendations are that blood glucose screening should be done at first antenatal booking visit, irrespective of the period of gestation. Universal screening and not risk-based screening should be done. OGTT should be offered after an overnight 8 hours fasting, and IDS-PG criteria should be followed. In resource-constrained settings, if this is not possible, only fasting plasma glucose or DIPSI criteria can be followed. Control values of blood glucose, remember, are always different from diagnostic values. So don't go by what laboratory says, go by what IDS-PG says, go by what WHO says, and go by what our guidelines say. So you all know that a bad start, if it is here, can influence the health here. So bad start lasts lifetime because of intergenerational transmission and epigenetic changes. So my deep appreciations and gratitude to all respected members of SOGP, PES, and SEFIs and participants. Special thanks to Getz Pharma for their virtual support. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Shaila.
Thank you, madam, for your extremely erudite presentation. Now we will move on towards our second session. In the second session, I'm going to further elaborate about GDM diagnosis and the non-pharmacological treatment required, and also explain the importance of self-monitoring of blood glucose levels and how to take it forward. Actually, today is our first day of our a series of webinars, which would be comprising over 3 days, a 2-hour session on each day. Today is the first, and then we'll have it on 5th June and 6th June. And we will take all issues regarding GDM and pre-existing diabetes. So let's move on to our presentation.
Second people has started.
So you need to click on the correct answer. Later on, submit. You have 2 minutes.
Just a reminder for everyone, the people who are not voting probably will miss out on the opportunity of becoming a smart dog.
Let's go ahead with the presentation now. So we just had a very good presentation on GDM screening and diagnosis and why is it important to do it. So taking that forwards, I have no conflict of interest for this presentation. We know that hyperglycemia is a major public health issue in the ever-growing diabetes and obesity epidemic witnessed in Pakistan, with a high prevalence as high as 25, as shown by the World Diabetes Forum presentation, the project done in 2015 to 2019. It is the commonest problem, metabolic disorder witnessed globally. About 20.4 million women worldwide suffer from hyperglycemia in pregnancy, with GDM accounting for 84% of the pregnancies with hyperglycemia in pregnancy. We all know that HIP is associated with adverse pregnancy outcome. Despite being aware of the consequences of hyperglycemia in pregnancy, to date, there has been no consensus. Everybody keeps on forwarding their own guidelines, confusing people. So whosoever embarks upon screening and diagnosing women for diabetes in pregnancy is confronted with conflicting recommendations and confusing strategies. We also know that timely identification and intervention of HIP reduces the risk of these adverse pregnancy outcomes. The aim of today's session is to standardize the clinical practice for the diagnosis and management of hyperglycemia in pregnancy across country. So the collaboration between SOGP and PES, this aims to improve short-term maternal, fetal, and neonatal health, and also goes a long way in improving clinical practice and women health in Pakistan. It also aims to reduce the incidence of type 2 diabetes mellitus, because we know that exposure to hyperglycemia in pregnancy affects fetal programming and predisposes these children to become juvenile diabetics later on in their life. So prevention for diabetes starts in utero. And that is why we all need to join hands to prevent this very important non-communicable disease. The learning objectives are as follows. So we need to explain how to diagnose GDM and correct timing with the best type of test, interpret the diagnostic test, manage cases of GDM, counsel and educate patients with GDM, and prescribe MNT and exercise, and also tell you the importance of MNT and exercise, and explain how, what role does SMBG plays in monitoring diabetes. So let's begin with the case. So this is a case of a 28-year-old para-1 aborta 0 who reports a 12-week gestation for pooping at your clinic. She's sure of dates. In her previous pregnancy, she booked with a primary care physician and had a normal delivery by a midwife at a clinic, which culminated in a stillborn baby girl. So she doesn't have an alive issue. That's why she thought of booking with you. On examination, she has a BMI of 27 kg per meter square. She's normotensive, and rest of her clinical examination is unremarkable. So we would be interested in your, how would you proceed with her? So a detailed family medical personal history was taken, which was found to be unremarkable. Previous pregnancy report was not available. Following baseline investigations were done by a primary physician, and the results are as follows. HB is 10.8, normal platelet TLC. B positive. She has a random blood glucose of 130 milligram per deciliter. The viral markers are negative, non-reactive. and the baby is right for dates. Do you think RBS was the right choice for screening for diabetes? After Dr. Shabir's presentation, you should have better ideas now. And any other investigation you would like to do, put it in the chat box, please. So the investigations, we need to have a detailed ultrasound, not just baby right for dates. And we need to do 2-hour 75-gram OGTT as explained by Professor Shabir Naz. Additional investigation is thyroid hormone, TSH, as a screening test, because thyroid hormone abnormalities would accompany, they are also an endocrinopathy. 20% of women have some kind of thyroid abnormal function. Hepatitis B, the HbA1c needs to be done, not as a screening test, but to determine risk to pregnancy. So the recommendation is universal testing as early as possible, irrespective of their risk factors, at booking, ideally in the first trimester. Why do we recommend early testing? Because we belong to Asian ethnicity. 2/3 of our antenatal population is obese or has a high BMI. Metabolic testing outside pregnancy is not done. Primary healthcare is deficient. People do not know their glycemic status. High prevalence of GDM in early pregnancy, as demonstrated by V. Mohan in the STRIDE study, in the neighboring country, having similar cultural beliefs, eating habits. 24% of Pakistani women found to have hyperglycemia in pregnancy, as demonstrated by the World Diabetes Forum GDM project. So all these things, they call for early screening. The gold standard test recommended by SOGP and SAFIs is the one-step standard 2-hour 75-gram OGTT, which entails blood glucose screening following 8 hours of fasting, and another estimate being made by 1 and 2 hours after 75-gram oral glucose load. Taken dissolved in 250 cc of water, taken over 3 to 5 minutes, so that no nausea or vomiting occurs and there is better compliance. The test is recommended in first trimester, and repeat test is done again if the first trimester test was negative at 24 to 28 weeks. A third trimester screening is also done if the second trimester test was missed or the lady booked late, or if the lady develops features suggestive of diabetes like polyhydramnios or LGA baby in the third trimester. So what we are aiming at, we do not want to miss an opportunity to screen women for diabetes. Now, how do we interpret the test? The 2-hour test, the following values: fasting of 5.1, 1 hour post glucose load 10, or 2 hour post glucose load of 8.5. Any one value raised out of the 3 is diagnostic for GDM according to IAD, PSG, and WHO. Sometimes people would be carrying their reports. So if they have a fasting of 7 millimoles or an RBS of more than 11, or a 2 hours postprandial of 11, or a HbA1c of greater than 6.5%. Any one of them would label them as pre-existing diabetes or pre-gestational diabetes. We need to be very clear how to interpret these test results. So I would suggest that you should take a screenshot and keep it with you and refer to it whenever you find you have to interpret the reports. So we are a strong proponent of one-step 75-gram OGTT, but sometimes we face situations in poor resource settings where we need to resort to other options for screening. The DIPSI method, the non-fasting 2-hour 75-gram OGTT, is done if the patient cannot fast or cannot come again. So in the same visit, we can do this test. Fasting blood glucose if patient cannot tolerate glucose load. HbA1c, I put it here especially, it is not recommended as a screening test for HIP in routine. I will discuss it in detail subsequently. So the DIPSI method, You do not require fasting. Testing is done irrespective of time of last meal. 75 grams of glucose dissolved in 250 ml, taken over 3 to 5 minutes, and a single venous blood sample after 2 hours of glucose load. The diagnostic cutoff is 7.8 millimoles or 140 milligram per deciliter. HbA1c test, which is performed during the first trimester to identify poor pregnancy outcome and high value greater than 6.5% is diagnostic of pre-gestational diabetes and is associated with high risk of fetal anomalies. So the higher the HbA1c, greater the risk of congenital anomalies. But it is not a screening test up till now. So the case continues, and the GTT report is 5.4 fasting, 1 hour postprandial is 8.5 millimoles, and 2 hours per 75 gram glucose load is 9 millimoles. So what is your diagnosis? It is GDM. If we refer to the chart again, I'm showing this chart again to tell you the importance. Her report is 5.4 and our cutoff for fasting was 5.1. And 2 hour value cutoff is 8.5 millimoles, hers was 9. So she has 2 abnormal values. And in our interpretation, any one value labels her, abnormal value labels her GDM. And this was the pre-existing diabetes. I put this slide again so as to emphasize the values. Treatment given to the patient was folic acid and aspirin, 150 milligram once daily. So do we agree with this treatment or something more should be done for her? Now that we have the GTT values, we need to tell the patient about the diagnosis, educate her, review her medical record. If available, lifestyle modification needs to be done, including diet and exercise, and then pharmacotherapy and a detailed antenatal care plan needs to be made right at the outset. So what do we counsel and educate patients with GDM? We need to tell them the implications of GDM for mother and baby, the importance of achieving normal glycemia and euglycemia and maintaining it. What are the glycemic targets? We need to make the patient a partner in treatment. We need to tell her the glycemic targets. By doing so, they also work with us in order to achieve the glycemic target. And the role of self-monitoring of blood glucose, need for regular frequent follow-up and obstetric care. The management options starting with MNT. We do not go for pharmacological treatment immediately. We need to tell them about diet and exercise. Pharmacological treatment with oral hypoglycemic agent if the MNT and exercise fail in achieving euglycemia. Then we need to tell them right over here that they need to follow up postpartum with blood glucose screening, because we see in our practice that patients would deliver in your facility and only 25 to 40% come for postnatal visits. It is very important to have a postpartum visit because we want to integrate these patients back into society and tell them how to follow up postpartum, which we will be doing in our subsequent sessions, in our second and third sessions. So what is the non-pharmacological treatment for GDM? Basically, it is lifestyle modifications. People, once they get pregnant, they think rest is very important and this would improve their pregnancy outcome. But in fact, we need to tell them that moderate exercise, about 30 minutes daily, 1 hour after a light meal or snack is recommended. And if they can't do it 30 minutes in one go, the exercise needs to be split into 15 minutes duration twice a day. Types of exercise that they can do is brisk walk, swimming, and arm exercise in sitting posture if they are being advised rest, because if they have a cervical circle arch, still they can do exercise. They can be sitting and do upper body exercises. So the diet, we aim to achieve normal glycemia, providing adequate maternal weight gain, and fetal growth. And also we aim to prevent starvation ketosis. You may involve a dietitian. The general advice given is avoid simple sugars and honey and food with high glycemic index. We need to apprise them food. We can give them a chart, a printout, or we can give them an address for a website, and we can display these charts in our own clinics. Small, frequent meals involving 3 snacks and 3 meals. Choose complex carbohydrates of low glycemic index. We're going to show you the charts. Caloric intake should be 25 to 35 kilocalories per kg. In obese women, minimum intake of 1500 to 1800 calories because we want to avoid starvation ketosis. Restricting caloric intake is not safe and it will lead to ketosis and risk of fetal demise. Artificial sweeteners are not recommended. A food mix should be comprising of 40% carbohydrates, 40% fat, and 20% protein. Minimum of 175 gram carbohydrates with fiber and 28 gram of fiber should be taken. A concept of food plate should be given to them. So this is the chart that we use in our, this type of chart we use in our clinics. This shows glycemic index. The red ones are high glycemic index. We usually aim for green and orange. So I'll just flash it through. You see apple has a low glycemic index. We may recommend this. Lentils 116. And then we individualize meal plans. And we may use this website where we feed in data. An individualized meal plan is usually given and we can tailor it. So this is the food plate where 1/4 of the plate should be of fruits, 1/4 vegetables, 1/4 grains, and this can be made into like oats and this bajra and corn flour. They can be mixed to make the roti. So 1/4 of the plate should be of grains and then 1/4 proteins. So make an individualized meal plan. Now we would like to explain self-monitoring of blood glucose. We aim to achieve good glycemic control without inducing hypoglycemia. Recommended frequency is usually 7 times a day, 3 pre-meal, 3 post-meal, and 1 midnight. Bedtime. Frequency may be tailored and customized to suit individuals. Sometimes it is not possible for a person to do a 7-day, 7-level daily SMBG. So we may rotate them, like fasting is mandatory and this 2 hours post-meal or 1 hour post-meal as your unit protocol could be. This is mandatory. And you may ask her, sometimes she may not do all 4 together. After doing 1 week, we will ask her to do fasting. And then some days she does post-breakfast, some days she does post-lunch and post-dinner, and brings a chart to us every time she comes for an antenatal checkup. The other way of doing it is to do a continuous glycemic monitoring. This is safe, effective tool for ambulatory maternal glucose monitoring, measures glucose levels in real time, but it is expensive, not freely available, does not replace the self-monitoring of blood glucose. It is still not very well researched in pregnancy. We need more RCTs on it. The target values are fasting is 5.3, which is 95 milligrams per deciliter. 1 hour is 7.8, equivalent to 140 milligram. And 2 hour postprandial is 6.7, which should be around 120. So medical therapy should be started if glycemic targets are not achieved after 1 to 2 weeks of MNT and exercise. So if these glycemic targets are not achieved, then we may start with medical therapy, which would be discussed later in our 3rd session. So the take-home message from my talk is universal screening needs to be practiced. We need to screen for diabetes early in pregnancy in the 1st trimester. because we all know that organogenesis gets completed by 8 to 10 weeks. So if it is done before that, gold standard test is 1 step to our 75 gram OGTT. We do have alternatives, but this is the gold standard. Sequential screen should be done in second trimester around 24 to 28 weeks, and third trimester, again, if it was missed in the first 2 trimesters, or if the woman reports late, or she develops criteria fulfilling diabetes like polyhydramnios. Then we need to emphasize self-monitoring of blood glucose, tell her about the glycemic targets. Management should begin with MNT and exercise always. After 2 weeks of MNT and exercise, we review the glycemic targets, whether have been achieved or not, and then we can go for medical therapy. Meal plans should be individualized depending upon social status and cultural practice. As per se, we need to choose glycemic index, food with glycemic index which are low. So early universal screening and diagnosis and management of HIP would provide improved pregnancy outcomes and has the potential to reduce future burden of diabetes. So with this, I thank my colleagues, SOGP and the PES colleagues, the participant, and especially Getz Pharma for providing us with this forum. And I would like to appreciate their help, Getz Pharma, and would like to look forward for further collaboration. So with this, I end my presentation. And if there are questions, you may put it in the chat box. And I would go for our third session. Before that, I would like to have the pre-poll. So we have 3 questions for session 3. So you have 3 minutes now. Okay, I would introduce Dr. Masarrat Riaz, who is a practicing endocrinologist at the Buckeye Institute of Diabetes and Endocrinology. And she works as an associate professor at the Buckeye Medical University. Over to you, Masarrat. She will talk about pharmacological treatment and insulin management.
So I've got 20 minutes to cover this topic. It's a vast topic, but I've tried to make the presentation as simple as possible so that the take-home messages are very clear. Okay, so this is the case of a 30-year-old woman who has been diagnosed as GDM, and she's on the basis of OGTT at 27th week. Her uterine size is appropriate for gestational age. And as Dr. Shehla has mentioned in her talk, she was initiated on medical nutrition therapy and exercise. And she was again followed up after 2 weeks.
So till Dr. Masarrat sorts it out, so let's put our thoughts together. We have, up till now, we have apprised that universal early screening in pregnancy for all pregnant women, irrespective of risk factors. The best test to use is a 1-step 75 gram 2-hour OGTT, and sequential screening should be done in the second trimester for all first trimester screen negatives, and a third trimester screening should be done in high-risk women who develop features for diabetes or who had missed their first 2 trimester screening tests. So so as not to miss an opportunity. And then after doing this test, interpretation should be according to the IDA PSG criteria. And then we need to identify women with pre-existing diabetes. The criteria has been explained. Then we need to know what are the glycemic targets. People often confuse, once we are taking the exams, or postgraduates often confuse the diagnostic criteria with the glycemic targets. So we need to register that they are different, and we need to tell them, we need to counsel early, we need to educate our women, we need to make them partners in treatment and give them targets, call them back frequently, and manage them as a team with an endocrinologist, ideally with a dietitian. And then we need to make their obstetric care plan from the beginning. If 2 weeks of medical nutrition therapy and exercise does not work, then we need to go ahead with the medical treatment, which is being explained by Dr. Masarrat Riaz. And I think she is back with us. She started to share.
Yes, can you hear me now? It's better?
Yes, Masarrat, we can hear you. Please carry on.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'm really sorry for the disturbance. These are things that you can't do much about it, the technology. Okay, so we were discussing the case. The patient was diagnosed as having GDM. She was prescribed, as was discussed with by Dr. Shaila, medical nutrition therapy and self-monitoring of blood glucose. And these are her readings. She came with these fasting and 2-hour post-meal values. If you remember the targets that she needs to have, these are more than what she should be having. So what is the next plan of action? What should we be doing at this stage? She's no previous history of diabetes, diagnosed first time, the 27th weeks. So you can write your answers in the chat box. In the meantime, let me continue. Okay, so either you are going to give another week's trial of MNTN exercise. Remember, she already has had 2 weeks of this MNTN exercise and self-monitoring of blood glucose, or you are going to start pharmacotherapy. That is the main question. So basically, when MNT alone fails, the pharmacological therapy is indicated, of course, and the targets, you know, Dr. Shaila has very nicely elaborated that fasting, it should be less than 95 and 2 hours post-meal, it should be less than 120. So if 1 or 2 weeks trial has been given, the first thing that you can prescribe along with medical nutrition therapy is metformin. And metformin is commonly used throughout the world for the treatment of gestational diabetes. Yes, it's a category B drug. And most of the women are able to tolerate and do nicely on it. But it should be remembered that as the pregnancy advances, metformin alone may not be sufficient to keep the levels in the targets that we desire in pregnancy. Plus, another question comes, if the fasting blood glucose at the outset is more than 126 and 2 hours postprandial glucose values are more than 200 milligrams, then we should not be waiting for 1 week of MNT and any other thing, and right away we can start the pharmacological therapy. There are some indications when metformin cannot be used. For example, when the women are unable to tolerate metformin, we know that it has got GI side effects. And in pregnancy, some people are having severe vomiting and dyspepsia. So in those cases, it's good not to start metformin. And sometimes patients may develop cholestasis, jaundice, and other side effects that may or may not be related to metformin, but they're not able to take it or tolerate it. So in these conditions, you should not be starting metformin, or if you have started and patient presents with these problems, then you should be stopping the metformin. Otherwise, you can easily prescribe metformin. Another question that people usually ask about the use of glibenclamide in pregnancy. We know that some guidelines do recommend this. But in Pakistan, the CEPHIS and Pakistan Endocrine Society does not recommend use of glibenclamide during pregnancy. So if metformin is not able to control the target values, then one should be moving to the next step. So the next step is insulin. So the first take-home message is, in pregnancy, do not wait for 1 month or 2 months to move to the next step. Just 1 to 2 weeks is more than enough to know whether the patient who is compliant with your dietary advice and who's doing physical activity and who's monitoring her blood glucose levels regularly. So if the blood glucose levels are not within target, start metformin immediately. And then 1 to 2 weeks is more than enough. If there is no other potential problems or complications, that is maternal or fetal, after 1 to 2 weeks, you have to switch to the next step. So the next step is insulin. So insulin should immediately be started in women if the woman is presenting with severe hyperglycemia. Severe hyperglycemia means if the blood sugar levels are more than 200, 250 and fasting, you're saying it's continuously very high levels. So you should not be waiting and you should be starting insulin earlier. Similarly, if there are symptoms of hyperglycemia, if there is ketosis or ketoacidosis, sometimes type 1 diabetes is presented first time as gestational diabetes. So you have to be very careful and look for the signs of ketosis or ketoacidosis. Plus, if there is evidence of feto-maternal compromise like hydramnios, intrauterine growth retardation, or large for gestational age fetus, these are again indications where insulin should be used right away. Okay. So if medical nutrition therapy and metformin fails to achieve the targets are fasting more than 95 and post-meal glucose levels more than 120. Or if the GDM is diagnosed in third trimester, MNT is advised for a week and insulin initiation if MNT fails. Again, as I already mentioned, that if the fasting plasma glucose at the time of diagnosis was more than 120 and post-meal levels more than 200, you can directly start insulin. It's not necessary that you have to go step by step. Any patient with GDM can be started on insulin. You can go with metformin plus insulin, and sometimes metformin has to be stopped and insulin is the only thing that can be given. So it depends on the patient to patient, and just like no one size fits all, so it's not necessary that every women will have to go through these steps. So you have to decide it clinically. So if there is ketonuria or ketosis due to diabetes, this is an absolute indication for insulin at any time of gestation. So let's talk about briefly about the insulins that are available for clinical use. So just to make it simplify, there are 3 types of insulin. One is called the mealtime insulin, that is short acting. It can be human, that is regular, or it can be in the form of analogs, which are rapid acting. And there are 2 formulations available. One is Aspart and one is Lispro. So these are the insulins that are available in Pakistan. Then we have got basal insulins. Again, it has got human, that is NPH, and we have got analogs in the form of glargine and detimir. Then we have got pre-mixed insulins, which provides both basal and mealtime coverage. And it has got a combination of both human and analogs, both are available. So we have got short-acting insulins, we have got rapid-acting insulins, we have got basal insulin, and we have got intermediate-acting insulins, plus a combination of all these. Now, this is just a pharmacokinetics of these insulins that are available. We know that short-acting regular insulin will start work in 30 minutes, while the ultra-short-acting will start work in 15 minutes. And the basal insulins will start in 2 hours and will go on to work for 12 to 24 hours. So different insulin has got different pharmacokinetics. So you need to know them nicely, and you need to know what type of blood sugar profile the patient is coming so that you can prescribe accordingly. Now, initiating insulin and dose calculation, people usually have got very much difficulty how to initiate, how to do this. So there is no one right way of initiating insulin. If you know your insulins and if you know your patient, you know the blood level, glucose levels profile, you can very easily initiate. Some basic principles that has been recommended through these guidelines is initial dose is usually 0.2 to 0.5 units per kg per day. Always start with the lower dose rather than giving too much, sending the patient into hypos and then reducing the dose. It's always good to start from a lower side and then adjust it according to the blood glucose levels that the patients do. But you should remember that obese women may need higher doses. So it's not necessary that every patient will be given this dose. If a woman is very much overweight and obese, you can start more than 0.5, 0.6. Sometimes you may need 0.8 units per kg, and very obese women, maybe 1 unit per kg will be needed. So it will vary from patient to patient. So if the patient is coming with high fasting blood glucose levels, then you can use intermediate acting human insulin or basal analog insulin. Basal analog is detimir, or you have got glargine. So they can both be used, or you can use NPH. So with a dose of 0.1 to 0.2 units at bedtime, it may be a starting dose, and it may be titrated every 48 to 72 hours to reach the desired blood glucose targets. If they've got high post-meal blood glucose levels, then bolus insulins that I've discussed, like ultra short acting or regular human insulin, they can be used with a dose of, again, 0.1 unit per kg per meal. And then the dose is titrated as per the blood glucose levels. You should not be titrating the dose every 6 to 8 hours or 10 hours or even within 24 hours. At least 48 to 72 hours should be given to further titrate the doses. So you can start, if some people will come having only fasting blood glucose levels high, so maybe intermediate acting is more than enough. Some people will come having normal fasting blood glucose and post meals are high. In those women, you can start short-acting insulins, but most of the time, we need to have a combination of both these, regular insulin plus basal insulin. Only basal insulin may be needed in some cases if the blood glucose is well controlled with non-pharmacological therapy. The pre-mixed insulins that are very commonly used in our country, they are not generally recommended for the management of gestational diabetes because of the risk of fluctuating glycemic control during pregnancy, and it should be avoided. However, we should remember that due to certain circumstances, if the patient is unwilling or patient cannot take the basal bolus combination, it's very difficult. In those circumstances, you can start the premixed insulins, but the ideal control is very difficult to achieve with these premixed insulins. But nevertheless, if the circumstances are so much, then you can, of course, do that one. Now, the question does not end here. When you prescribe insulin, you have to tell some basic things and principles to the patient. So I have tried to cover just few slides about the practical aspects related to insulin use. We have got syringes and needles available, and we have got pen devices. So according to the patient preference, you can use both. In pen, of course, you have to use 2 different types of pens and number of pricks may be more, while with the help of syringe, you can mix the short-acting and intermediate-acting insulin in one go, and number of pricks may be less. Plus the cost, of course, the cost is a very important issue. So you need to teach the patient how to fill the syringe, how to take the insulin, where to take. These are some very important aspects. Now we are talking about pan-Pakistan dissemination of these guidelines. So everywhere the situation is not same. Usually this is where we advise our patient to keep their insulin in fridge. It should not be put in the freezer compartment so that it freezes and it loses its efficacy. If the patients are unable to draw insulin in syringe, then pre-filled syringe can be kept in the refrigerators. But think about the places where fridge is not available, then cooler is an alternate thing which is available. Insulin can be stored in the bowl of this cooler containing cold water, but there should be no ice, and water should be clean and should be daily changed. Having said that, there are areas, there are places where even cooler is not available. So this is something matka available everywhere, and people do use this for storage of insulin. The insulin syringes can be kept in a plastic bag or can be tied with different color strings and can be kept in this one. So this is no excuse for not using insulin if patients do not have the access of fridge. So there are multiple things that you can use, and you can guide and teach your patients. Another important thing that you need to teach your patient is about the visual signs of deterioration. For example, if there is strange color, there is precipitation, there is lumpiness, there is frostiness, it means that insulin has lost its efficacy and it should not be used, especially if the insulin has been freezed. So it not be used because it's not going to act, and you are going to increase the doses, and patient may ultimately, when once in a while they will get the proper insulin, they may go into the hypos. So you have to teach all these practical things while prescribing insulin. Another important thing is technique of injecting insulin. Just a diagrammatic representation, how you should be telling the patients how to draw the insulin, how to pinch the abdomen, and then how to inject it at the 90 degrees. This is through syringe. Same principle usually applies with the help of pens. In pregnancy, people are very reluctant to put insulin on their abdomen, having a fear that this is going to affect the baby. So this is something where education, diabetes-related education comes, and you should tell them that this syringe is not going to pierce to your baby, it's just in the skin and subcutaneous tissue. So these are the factors, real-life factors and myths that should be corrected. Sites that can be used, abdomen, outer arms, buttocks, and upper and outer thighs. This should clearly be told to the patient, plus the rotation of the sites, that every day they should not be taking at the same place, they should be checking different sites, and this should be placed in the fat layer under skin. Rotation of site is very important, otherwise a patient may come with different problems of injecting insulin. So the take-home message is 5 steps of pattern management. Whenever you are prescribing any medicine, whether it's oral or insulin, you should establish pre-meal and post-meal glucose targets. Gather the patient data to create a glucose profile. Identify by analyzing the logbook for trends. Assess the influencing factors. and then take action. So this is not easy. It's not a one-time job. Once a patient come and you prescribe, and then the patient is coming after 2 months or 3 months. Whenever you are giving any pharmacologic therapy, or even with the non-pharmacologic therapy, you need to see these patients quite frequently, and you need to move ahead on the second step sooner rather than later. So with this, I would like to end this presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Masarrat, for an excellent practical presentation with a lot of practical aspects to go about. I think it would go a long way in improving practice. We would like to go towards our post-pose. You had your 3 pre-pose before each session. Now you're going to have 1 post-pose. Let's see, this is for our own efficacy, how our presentations went and how much message we could get across you. So please do attempt post-pose as well, because the score would be from both pre-poll and post-poll. After completing, please submit, press the button of submit, or click the button of submit also. Usman, how many submissions up till now?
80 submissions have been done so far, now 81.
And the pre-poll submissions were how many?
They were around 90 pre-poll submission for multiple sessions.
Okay. Thank you. So another 10 seconds to go, and then we finish, we close the polls. So now we will have a panel discussion about all these 3 sessions. It would be involving all the panelists and the speakers. We would like to take the questions first from the audience, and we have so far 5 questions. One was role of aspirin during pregnancy, and a similar question, whether in pregnancy aspirin is contraindicated and why is it given? So I would take that question and I would tell you that it is not contraindicated. Aspirin is not contraindicated in pregnancy. And we use aspirin in a dose of 150 milligram at night so as to prevent preeclampsia. Preeclampsia, diabetes is the risk factor for preeclampsia. So women, whether they are GDM or having pre-existing diabetes, they're all given before 16 weeks of gestation, aspirin as a part of the treatment. Now I would like Professor Shabeen to take the second question. Dr. Hamna asked what is, why the cutoff of 2-hour postprandial glycemic target is 6.7 and not 6.4?
Not 2 hours postprandial glucose control that is given, that we follow is given by what is given by NICE guideline in WHO, and that should not go beyond 120 milligrams per dl, 2 hours, and the 0 hour will start with the injection of first bite of food.
Thank you, Dr. Shabeen. Dr. Hamna, the latest guideline from American Diabetic Association is also promoting 6.7 as your 2-hour glycemic target and not 6.4.
Dr. Sheila?
Yes.
Can I respond to the question which was asked about fasting during pregnancy?
Please.
Fasting during pregnancy, especially if the woman is diabetic, she belongs to a very high-risk group of category, which is given by DAR guidelines, DAR IDF guidelines. So the best thing is that she should not be fasting during pregnancy. But however, if the woman insists to fast and she is pregnant and diabetic, then in that case, the dosage and the adjustment of insulin or the drugs should be referred from DAR IDF guideline, DAR IDF guidelines. All healthcare providers are requested to refer to those guidelines, which are the latest one.
Thank you, Professor Shabeen. You made our life much easier. There was a question about which oral hypoglycemic drug to be used. For now, we just have the safety data for metformin, which is extensive, and we are using it. Glyburide, the PEST also does not recommend, SOGP also does not recommend, because the fetal safety data is pretty less, and neither do other guidelines. Some of the guidelines do recommend, but with caution. So for all practical purposes, the oral hypoglycemic drug currently in use is metformin only. Dr. Masarrat, I would like you to take this question from Dr. Asim Munir Alvi. insulin glargine is category C and Detrem is category B.
Yes, it's category C, but glargine has been used in pregnancy, is being used throughout the world. And the CEPHI's recommendations are, if the patient was already taking glargine before pregnancy, you may continue it. For newly diagnosed GDM cases, it's better to initiate the Detimir, which is available. You can use NPH and Detimir, but glargine can also be used. And the latest studies that have come up, they have not shown any adverse effects. So it is very safely used in pregnancy as well.
Okay, I would like you to take another question, Masara. Please explain the term basal bolus insulin pre-mixed and what is the difference?
Okay, as I described in my presentation, we have got different types of insulins available. One is the insulin which works whenever we take food, the blood glucose levels becomes high. So these insulins especially targeted those values. So these are called bolus insulin. And the basal one is that which acts slowly over the next 12 to 24 hours in our body. So they act very slowly and they do not put their actions very rapidly. So they are called basal insulins. And the examples are like intermediate acting insulin, NPH, and we have got glargine and we have got Detimir. So these are basal insulins, while bolus is short acting or ultra short acting insulins, whether it's in the form of human insulin R or Aspart or Lispro. So these are boluses. These are given before meals to control the blood glucose levels that rises because of the meals that the women takes. So this is the basic difference.
Thank you very much. Another question asked by Dr. Asim was, how will we label GDM and whom will be labeled pre-existing? So pre-existing diabetics will have a history when they present, if they are taking some kind of treatment. And then we have the diagnostic criteria explained by Professor Shabeen and then myself again in our presentation, that you have to do a 2 hour 75 gram OGTT, and if the blood glucose level are 5.1 fasting and 10 1 hour and 8.7 2 hour, and one value which is above these is enough to label them as GDM. And then pre-existing had different criteria, which included both HbA1c level, the fasting level of 7, and the random blood glucose could be 11.1, which is 200, or HbA1c could be 6.5 or above. So that's how we decided whether they are GDM or pre-existing. Then we had another question. What is the worldwide consensus? And then they did not complete. Can we use basal plus insulin in pregnancy? I think what they're asking is basal and probably bolus insulins, mealtime insulin. They can be used. Professor Masara gave us a very good account of it. That's how pre-mixed insulins are being used.
This pre-mixed insulin question is asked by Dr. Irfan. He had been instrumental in our GDM, WDF GDM study from Multan. And this question may be answered by Dr. Musarrat, please. She already has answered, but if you can re-emphasize, Dr. Musarrat.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question. What you want me to answer? Sorry.
Role of premixed insulin in
pregnancy. Right. Okay, so basically premixed insulin has got a fixed combination of short-acting and intermediate or long-acting insulins. So as I have mentioned in my slide also, that every patient is different. So some patients may be needing 50-50 combination, some might be needing 60-40, sometimes 30-70, which is very rare. Usually we need 50% basal and 50% bolus and basal. But this changes with every patient. So in pre-mixed insulins, you do not have the option of this one. There is, as I said, not one size fits all. So the good glycemic control, the fine tuning that you need during pregnancy, and we have seen this is very important. The targets are very well defined, that random post meal should not be more than 120. In fact, any time during pregnancy, it should not be more than 120, and fasting should not be more than 95. So these targets are very difficult to achieve with the premixed insulins. Having said that, if there are instances in which patient is unwilling or the patient cannot take the basal bolus, then the question is whether to give insulin or have this blood sugars high because patient is not taking. So in those instances, you can use premix insulins, but you should remember that the fine tuning will not be achieved and the desired results may not be what you are aiming for. So that is why all the recommendations are about basal bolus regime. Premix is not the first choice.
Thank you. Now there are a few questions addressed to me. Why they say why the dose of aspirin is 150 and not 75. You see, some of them cannot really convert it. And if the dose is up to 100 milligram or less, it is not very effective. It has been seen through research. So that is why sometimes 75 milligram, 81 milligram, they will not be very effective. And now the dose with the Fetal Maternal Foundation of UK and the Society of Fetal Medicine in America, they all go for 150 milligram. That is the dose, and it works best if you give at night and not in the morning. Another question was, does weight have an importance in pregnancy? Yes, we just told you that the dose of insulin is 0.2 to 0.5 per kg per day. So the weight would make a difference in calculation of dose. We also have a rough formula, like you multiply by 0.7 in first trimester, the weight, and then you multiply by 0.8 and 0.9 and then 1 after 36 weeks. So that has been given by SOGP guidelines and you can just follow it from there. But from the very outset, we told you 0.2 to 0.5 milligram per kg. So weight is very important. It would depend, the total daily dose of insulin would depend upon the weight. There is another question from Dr. Masarat. I would like you to take it. Can we use insulin degludec in pregnancy and can we give long-acting insulins?
No, degludec has not been studied and it's currently not recommended for use in pregnancy. The insulins that I have described in my presentation, these are the only ones because we have got another insulin glulicin available, but this is also not recommended to use in pregnancy. Then we have got combinations of insulin with GLP agonist. They are not recommended for use in pregnancy. So we have got these limited insulins that have been studied very nicely and these are recommended.
Thank you very much. So many questions about aspirin. Then so many questions about what you have already told us, Dr. Masarat.
There's a very important question lying there in the chat box, and that says which guidelines for screening GDM are advisable? NICE, WHO, IDSPG.
I think we got the answer. We have our own guideline now, SOGP guideline, and you have the CEPI's guideline. And we tell you that the screening test to use is 1-step 75 gram OGTT. In special circumstances, where people cannot tolerate fasting, you can use DIPSI. And when they cannot tolerate the glucose load, you can use fasting. So we have given you 3 options, but the test that we promote and which is of gold standard is 1-step 2-hour 75 gram OGTT using the IAD PSG criteria. And WHO 2013 also promotes the same. So I hope this answers your question,
Dr. Shala.
Yes.
Can I add to what you have very nicely said?
Yes, please.
This question is really, that stirs our mind. Actually, this program that we are conducting now with the help of CARES and PES and SOGP, this program is meant to convey this very message that the guidelines which has been given for Pakistan, that has to be followed. Because NICE, WHO, IDSPG, they all have been combined together according to our situation. So the best thing is to follow the guidelines which is there for your country. And obviously guidelines are not the final words. This is just a template and we tend to revise it after 2 years. So if there are any problems there in that guideline, please indicate to us so that we are able to modify it as per need. So I think better not to look at so many guidelines in order to practice the screening, diagnosis and treatment of GDM, but rather to confine to the guidelines which are given in the for Pakistan.
Thank you. This seminar is being arranged so that all confusions, all myths and misbeliefs are dispelled. So we would like you to come unified on board and start practicing and using the SOGP guideline, which is freely available. It is not a hidden fact. It is not a paid guideline, and it would be soon be available through SOGP website, and you can access it directly. So all this is being conducted so that you are on the same boat. So somebody's asked, do we advise OGTT to all women and the burden on the lab? Yes, at the moment we are recommending, because we are a high-risk group. We are Asians. We have 2/3 of our antenatal population is either overweight or obese. And we have numerous studies demonstrating that we have early onset GDM. So if we don't do it early in pregnancy, we will be missing quite a lot of them. So please, because the previous recommendation was to do an OGTT at 24 weeks. So you see, what about the first 24 weeks? People who had hyperglycemia would continue to suffer. And that's why the pregnancy outcomes never improved. So we are going to do it early in pregnancy. We are going to apply the test universally, irrespective of risk factors. And we are going to use the 2 hour 75 gram OGTT. We have to do sequential screening in second trimester at 24 to 28 weeks. Then the third trimester screen for people who had missed the first 2 screens or who develop high-risk features like polyhydramnios or LGA baby in the third trimester.
So can I add something to it, Dr. Shaila? This is a very important question, and that comes up every now and then, that it is a great burden on lab and on healthcare system. The answer to it is, you have very nicely answered, Dr. Shaila. Just to add and to emphasize that if you are spending 200 rupees on a woman, or for that matter, 150 rupees on a woman, you save so much in future. You save that child, the loss of that pregnancy, the fetal abnormalities, and that mother who is likely to be converted to type 2 diabetes and add to the present burden of diabetes. So I think a bargain of 150 to 200 rupees is not a bad bargain for the future better outcomes of mother and child.
Thank you very much. There is a question about, is GDM, in GDM if patient is having high blood pressure, any guideline? Yes, GDM patients would be treated with high blood pressure according to the guideline for hypertension and this. SOGP is in the process of publishing the hypertensive disorder guideline also. So be on the lookout for it, and we'll have a separate dissemination. What is the recommended dose of insulin starting? And some doctors start from 40 to 50. This was a question asked by Mr. Zulfikar. The starting dose would depend upon the weight of the patient and the trimester of the patient. As I told you, we told you about 0.2 to 0.5 for women who are of normal weight. For obese women, you would require more. But as a rough guideline, we have about 0.6 multiply with the weight of the patient. In the first trimester, there is no 0.7, and then 0.8 in the second trimester, and 0.9 up to 36 weeks in the third trimester, and then 1 after 36 weeks. You can multiply this with the weight of the woman, and you get a rough guideline. Safety of glargine has been asked repeatedly. Dr. Abbas, I would like you to have your comments about safety of glargine. And they also ask, is there any limitation in prescribing Lantus insulin?
So Sabine, again, Shaila, Sarat has partly answered this. A glargine rule of thumb is very easy. If you dissect the data right this time, recommendation from our platform is that if someone is already taking glargine and she's already gotten pregnant on glargine, and you're seeing them after they're pregnant, there is no data to suggest that we should definitely stop. So in summary, we can continue these individuals on glargine. If someone you were seeing for the first time in your clinical practice with hyperglycemia during pregnancy, even if they had diabetes before, you might not want to start them at that time, because you have other options that you can choose from.
Thank you very much.
Over to you, Sabir.
Dr. Khurshid, I would like you to take the question about prescribing Lantus insulin in pregnancy. What is your experience? Does it harm in real scenarios? So somebody has requested for a senior opinion, the president of PES in person.
So I don't think Khurshid is available right now. And again, Glargine and Lantus are the same thing. So I think
Okay.
I've answered that in the past as well. So so it's the same rule. Lantus is just the brand name for the.
Thank you very much. So I think all our questions have been answered. Some were repeats, quite a few of them. And thank you for a great session. I thank my panelists, the speakers, President SOGP, President PES, Professor Abbas Raza, and Professor Shabeen, Dr. Masarrat, Dr. Aisha, and especially. It is a great session, and everybody was present throughout. We had very good attendance, and now we are going to display the results of our pre and post polls. The correct answer has been highlighted by the red box. So pre-poll, the answer was 65% correct, and post-poll 92. So I think our objective has been achieved. Second question, please. This was about the test. Pre-poll 44% and post-poll 85%. So I'm so glad. I really sort of thank our speakers and the participants for listening very carefully. Next, please. The third question was again about a Paris lady who comes in late, and 82% answered correctly in the pre-test, and 82% both the same. So I think people knew about this. Next, please. Question 4, we see a significant improvement from 47% pre-poll to 76% post-poll. Thank you very much for listening carefully. Next, please. And then the question 5, the post-poll percentage has increased to 61. That's great. Next question. 35 were able to answer, and then 29. What went wrong? But I hope you know now that we need to supplement with metformin and basal or bolus insulin. Next, please. This is great. From 43% to 75%, people answered correctly. So I think the topic has been dealt with very well, and people have listened to it carefully, and there is significant improvement. Now let's display the names of the winners.
Okay, so this is, Shala, I'm very glad. Number one, I must commend all of you for doing such a wonderful job. This is what I do for a living. So I do a lot of CMEs online. I see a lot of CMEs in person, but this is one of the most amazing responses that I have. They're actually out there responses, which you have seen the results of. Actually, I'm not only pleasantly surprised, I'm very happy to be part of this program. And the results speaks for themselves. So you don't have to be a critic or a supporter of this program to say this is an excellent. And I'm so glad that we were able to do and compare them in pre and post election. Last thing, which is not the least, as we promised, this is going to be an exciting time for all of us, but it is even furthermore complemented by 3 stars that we have picked up from are not only attended most of the all of the meeting, they were part of the pre-polls of all the pre-polls and the post-polls, and these are the stars who have actually scored the highest. So not to undermine the attendance and everything, but these people were more tentative. I know it was a very difficult decision looking at the scores right now to choose the top 3, and the criteria was very was done very clearly that you have to answer most of the questions right, and you have to do it in the earliest time period that you could select. And 3 winners for today is, and they will all be getting Littmann stethoscope this time. So that they can enjoy taking care of patients as they are enjoying being part of the CME. The first name is Dr. Marfood Anwar. His email is drmarfood@gmail.com. Dr. Nazish Fatma, her email address is nazisfatma@gmail.com, and Sahar Fatma, her email address is okay. So they will be hearing soon from us and getting the award, souvenir. The name will be posted, which they can proudly boost by saying that it's already. So this CME will be on the website, and this CME from this group. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Abbas. I congratulate the winners, Marfouz Anwar, Nazish Fatma, Sahar Fatma. You can drop your contact numbers. Otherwise, we'll be giving you an email message, and we will get your contact number through that. It was a wonderful CME. I would like to connect that this is session, today's was day 1. Now we have another session on 5th of June, that is Saturday, and then another one on 6th of June. So we will be discussing the obstetric management, timing of delivery, postpartum management, contraception, and management about pre-existing diabetes, patients who have pre-existing diabetes, how to manage them in their pregnancy.
Shall I just want to comment one thing? I saw Aisha's face being popped up in one of the screens, and she vanished, and I could see the smile on her face. I'm so happy for her, for all her efforts coming true today.
We thank Aisha sincerely. She was the main bridge between PES and SOGP. And she was so persistent and always smiling, taking our comments and reservations very well in a very good fashion. And I think this is the best collaboration we have had. And we look forward to many such collaborations. From SOGP, I would like to convey my thanks from the President, from the Secretary General, and from the chair of SOGP, and I being the co-chair and the rapporteur for this session, moderator for this session. We all sincerely convey our thanks to Aisha, Professor Abbas, Professor Khurshid, Professor Razia Qurejo, Professor Halima Hashmi, and to all the participants. And very especially to Getz Pharma for having this CME put together, for collaborating, for making it easier, and for disseminating. They made all these flyers and banners. And this program would be available at the SOGP YouTube channel and also at the PES YouTube channel. So people can view it later on also, so for clarification. Thank you very much. We would like to end now.
Thank you. Thank you to all winners, and thank you to SOGP Secretariat as well for all their help in disseminating the information. So thank you, Dr. Sheila. You have been a very good moderator.
This is for Aisha.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It
wouldn't have been possible without all of you.
Yeah, I know there should be a big clap for you. In fact, you are the binding force between SOGP PES. Thank you, Dr. Abbas. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. And I think this was an absolutely useful CME. Aisha, you want to say something in concluding?
It was a wonderful CME, I must say, because everybody participated and made it, the polls, the pre-polls, the post-polls show the difference. Aisha, over to you.
I'm sure we'll continue doing such sessions even in future as well. So this is the first series. There's another series that is going on, which is Train the Trainer program. We already had one such session in April. And this is mainly to improve antenatal diabetes care, screening and management across Pakistan. And inshallah, this will start showing its fruit in upcoming months even. So the participants, their presence and their participation till the end is wonderful. And I'm sure this quiz throughout the program, they have enjoyed it very much. And I'm really grateful to Professor Shabir, Professor Shaila Bakai, Professor Halima, Yasmin, and all the SOGP colleagues. Really grateful to my own team. Dr. Basada had been instrumental in throughout this journey, and very much happy that other members of our team who will be presenting, Dr. Musarrat Riaz, and in other days, rest of our team members will be presenting, and you'll be having a wonderful learning treat to manage hypoglycemia in pregnancy. And
Aisha,
so
SOGP and PES are one team.
Yes. So through Serendip we are together. Okay. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much.
So don't forget, 5th June, we are going to have a 2-hour session on the Saturday afternoon from 2 to 4 Please join us on that day and again on Sunday from 2 to 4. Thank you very much. Have a great Sunday and have a great week ahead. Assalamu alaikum.